So just kind of rounding out the picture, this is just some applications, right? You add your applications at the local layers or at the distributed layer, either in the cloud at the internet layer or at the local layers. The benefit of this model is that as you move things closer to your citizens, as you move them closer to your customers, if connectivity is lost at any point in this cycle, even over here, you still can function at a local level. You still have the application, you still have the validation, so you can still have utilization of those applications. Functionality doesn't stop because our reliability on the internet is something that, once again, we're going back to the wild, wild west. We can't always rely on that to be working. We have no control over it. So implementing a scalable solution with local functionality means that our citizens, our customers, our relying parties will always be able to get the critical validation information they need at the time of operation. And therefore, every time a transaction has occurred, every time an access is attempted, we can perform that validation of, is this person who they say they are, and should I let them do what they're trying to do right now? I'm just going to take it one step further. It isn't simply designed only for one program as well. In the Core Street model that we've developed, because we're utilizing standards, this allows organizations and countries to start working together in a common shared model using existing standards for validation. They can actually share this information. Things like their revocation information is already available to the open world. So if I, as the representatives from Switzerland, decide that we're going to also trust the identities from Austria, we can actually pick up their validation information and distribute it with our own. So not only is our information local to our user base and potentially anyone who would be using it, but also those from other communities that we've established trust with. So I can actually scale this beyond what I've built myself and start scaling it to other programs that I share common interests with, whether those are cross-border in country or cross-organizational in companies, and still distribute this in a manner that's consistent with local validation to address speed and potential loss of connectivity, reliability because my chain of trust stays intact because I'm always digitally signing everything through the process. So I know that I'm not getting false information from a source that I don't trust. And of course, as a result, the entire thing ends up being much more reliable. Fast, reliable, secure, trustworthy. So that's pure validation, and that's really what I came to speak about today. I'm going to tease you with what we're going to talk in more detail about in the future. And this is something that Core Street is already doing today in several areas. As you move forward, the ability to utilize any credential for more things tends to make that credential an even better investment for the organizations that created it. Again, whether that's a citizen ID or a corporate identity card that's used for establishing usage within a company. But there's interesting things that happen. As we build strong identities, the idea is that you want that identity to be something that can live for a long time. So we've seen this in several programs. Use that identity for establishing just who someone is and learn how to associate other attributes that typically are more dynamic, that change over time, with that identity, as opposed to making it embedded in the identity. Because let's face it, if you're in the military and we make your rank part of your identity, what happens when your rank changes? We have to revoke that identity and reissue a new one. If that identity happens to be on a smart card, it means I've actually got to get you to come someplace, revoke that card, and reissue it, because it's not something they just do over the internet when they feel like it, because that would break policy. So the idea is that things that change shouldn't be embedded within the identity. but they can be associated with that identity so that we can make attributes, dynamic attribute modifications, without ever actually having to touch the identity. And this becomes very critical in citizen ID and military ID programs, first responder programs, things where people have attributes associated with their identities that tend to change a lot more often than their identity. Because I've been John Baez for, well, more years than I'm going to admit at the moment. And that hasn't changed. But the roles and privileges and attributes that I've had over my lifetime have changed dynamically. They've changed dynamically over the last 5 years, over the last 3 years. And so having that ability to change attributes without ever touching the identity gives an identity program the ability to maintain the integrity around that identity and continuously update their privileges. And much like we do with the validation of that identity, we've created the ability to marry off-card attributes with those identities in what's called identity and privilege lists, which are deployed in exactly the same manner, that three-tiered infrastructure. Distribute it out locally, let the local entities, whether those are states, cities, regions, divisions of an organization, manage those identity attributes on their own and then distribute them locally so that that information, once again, is resident, local to wherever it's being used. And any connectivity back to the issuing source does not have to be live at the time of usage. So I fall back on those four things. Actually, I've got a little ahead of myself. I forgot to address the fact that once we start doing this, each region can actually share these across regions as well. So it's the same model, right? When we looked at validation, we're using the standard, and we can share that information from country to country, from organization to organization. Well, the same thing with identity and privileges. Once we establish that, I can now share that information across regions, across countries, across organizations in a manner that's consistent with the deployment model in the field. So, why is distributed important? Let's talk about validation first. To maintain the trust model that we've built. Every credentialing program, every identity program invests a lot of time, effort, and energy, not to mention money, into creating a trustworthy identity. If we don't validate it every time it's used, in effect, you've built a very nice program that says, trust me. The idea is that we want to know whether we trust you, not you tell me whether you trust me. So this program, validation maintains the trust. It maintains the integrity of your program that you've invested in. Using standards that exist, make sure the applications will always work with it. RFC 2560, OCSP is a widely adopted standard. And I apologize, I did have a slide with lots of applications, but the bottom line is there's literally lots of applications, whether that's within your privilege managed infrastructure, within your access levels. Microsoft has even embedded it in their latest operating systems. So this is not something that you're reinventing the wheel or creating more work. It's a standard that exists and is widely recognized. Making sure that we address reliability, availability, and speed are also addressed by this distributed model. Making things local means it's very fast. One of the programs we work with, they have a large number of revoked certificates. We're talking in the neighborhood of about 30 million revoked certificates as part of their program. These identity cards that are part of that program are used around the planet. Their average response time in a program from the application, the average validation response time is under 1/10 of a second. So it's faster than I notice anyway. So it addresses the speed and, of course, the ability to distribute local, make sure that you've got reliability and always available. So that's really what I came to say. That's how we help make these programs more successful, by providing a validation layer that maintains the integrity of the overall system.